Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, answer the following two questions. Question number one, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered to you. You should stick around. It is enlightening, informative, and educational. We begin today by quoting a passage in the Bible. No, we're not preaching the gospel, but the topic requires as a basis to use a passage in the Bible. That's Matthew 25, verse 35. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me, and I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or in need of clothing and we clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And Jesus will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least fortunate of your brothers and sisters, you did for me. It is near impossible to understand the notion of Christianity Republicans have always touted to embrace. The basic principle of Christianity is to help the least fortunate, to clothe those who are naked, to feed those who are hungry, to give shelter to those who are homeless. Even a wizard would have a difficult time reconciling Republicans' claim of Christianity with their callousness, their indifference towards the least fortunate, and usually their harsh stance when it comes to lending a hand to those in need. But what's even more troubling, even to the devil himself, is the easiness and the expediency Republicans use to cater to those who already have plenty. And also the justification they make to take away from the least fortunate and to justify not helping them. Maybe to the devil, but to the rest of us living right here in the United States, it was not at all surprising that Republican representative in Washington had overwhelmingly, both houses, approve borrowing $1.5 trillion and just hand it to large corporations and wealthy individuals. Not only did the scrap, the crumbs left, they distributed it to the constituent in the form of $40 and $60 in extra in their paycheck. But Republican legislators made certain those constituents whose naivete coupled with their gullibility can only be matched by their extreme ignorance cannot even realize that they are fully responsible for the whole $1.5 trillion borrowed by the Republican legislators. But get this, neither the large corporation nor the wealthy individual who received the bulk of the borrowed money need to pay a single penny back. No, we're not kidding you. Everything that needs to be paid. Every single penny is left to the constituent and their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren to carry the burden of paying back the loan. A majority in the country did not approve. Now facing with an additional $1.8 trillion added to the national debt, the fiscally conservative Republican came up with this brilliant idea. Why not have the least fortunate pay for it? Why not have the people at the bottom pay for it? Why not have those who are collecting Social Security? Why not have them pay for it? This is not speculation. This is not an assumption. This is what Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, said during an interview, according to Bloomberg, a few weeks before the midterm election. He said that because the national debt is, I'm quoting, a bipartisan problem, both parties are responsible for the problem, and the way to at least tackle the problem is to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and all financial assistance to those who are least fortunate among us. You see, it is very difficult to understand the rationale Republican legislators have used over decades in order to solve financial problem in the country. For more than almost 100 years now, Republican legislators have always resorted to the exact same approach. We have the questions as to, is it on purpose? Do they hate the constituents? Do they know the impact of what they propose? Because in all fairness, one has to ask the $1.5 trillion question. Why would the very individuals we elect to improve our lives, to do things that help us better our own financial situation, why would those very individuals work so hard against us? That's the $1.5 trillion question. Why in the world the Republican representative? Now, there is no argument. We talked about that a lot on this program, that legislators of both parties, they have their shares of responsibility for the state of affairs in the United States of America. But there is one particular aspect of the problem the country has confronted that lays directly at the door of the Republican Party. Time and again, for decades now, and it doesn't matter, it seems almost as if it is ingrained in their DNA to do things that are blatantly, obviously, tangibly detrimental to the constituent. Now today, we are going to continue the discussion about the welfare program. We already tackle Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We'll touch on those tangentially, but we're not going to talk about those because, as I mentioned, we've already talked about those at length before the midterm election. We have debated those, and you will find on the People Branch YouTube channel, that is on the People Branch YouTube channel, you will find information that is currently available under the, I believe the title is Fight to the Entitlement, if I'm not mistaken. It is the Fight to the Entitlement. We probably have at the very least 4 or 5 videos that are currently available that talks about Social Security, that talks about Medicare, that talk about Medicaid, which we debated prior to the midterm election. So those documents, or those videos rather, that talk at length about those 2 items are on the People Branch YouTube channel. So check it out. And we do not provide speculation or assumption. We provide you factual, verifiable information for you to understand when we make the statement. We're not making statement just for the sake of making statement. We're not making statement to match others. We're making statement that can be verified, and we're making statement that are justified because of information that are readily available for us to analyze in order to provide you with this analysis. So the question is, why, for decades now, Republicans have time and again passed legislations or oppose legislation that are favorable, that are beneficial for the constituent? Republicans have always opposed them. And if they pass legislation, they've always passed legislation that are not just on the surface, that are detrimental to the constituent, ultimately to the country. So in the discussion of the welfare system, which we will tackle shortly, we will show you once again that Republican legislators have traded in deception in order to pass legislation, to oppose legislation, or to undermine legislations. When we come back, we will show you, give you proof of those statements, and we will move to discuss the welfare system. We will try at best as possible to, at least we will begin to debunk, because we anticipate that the discussion on the welfare programs will take a few days to get to the bottom of a number of subtexts that always come into the discussion whenever the word welfare come into play. So don't go anywhere. We will come back to have a frank discussions on why do your Republican representative, why do they work so hard? It's not by accident they do what they do. They debate it. If there is something better, they go against it. And in the end, they go against what's beneficial for you, the constituent, or they pass legislation that are detrimental to the constituent. We have an idea why they do that, but what we have not been able to figure out up to this point is, why do we, the constituent, continue to vote those same individuals back in office to continue to hurt us? That's the big question. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we will address those various aspects of the topic we're talking about today.
I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican and he's not. He's not a conservative Republican. He's an opportunist. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and 25 or 30% of the people would still follow him because he gives voice to their anger and their frustration. But he's not fit to be President of the United States.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Whenever the word welfare is used, and it is used mostly by pundit in the Republican Party to stoke the anger of the Republican constituent. Now, I want to make a couple of things very clear discussing the welfare system. First, it is a tidbit of information, but it is necessary to bring it to the surface. I mentioned just before the break that for decades, Republicans have consistently opposed legislation which are beneficial for the constituent, and they have passed consistently legislations which are detrimental to the constituent, ultimately to the country. And we say this is not speculation. This is not assumption. And we're going to provide you a few examples in order to set the base. So when we talk about the welfare system, you have a good understanding as to where we're coming from. The fact that you hear Republican legislators arguing certain aspect, we can call it politics, but there are some aspects of their argument that are purely Machiavellian, because it is meant to deceive. It is not politics. In politics, you try to outwit the other side. But if you have to trade in deception, then it is no longer politics. It is just deception. But what makes it even worse is the fact that you also have not just those legislators in Washington, not just the politician in Washington, but you have those who have an audience, like Fox, like the Rush Limbaugh of the world, Tucker Carlson, Ingram, and so on. They have an audience, and they work aggressively to dumbify the audience. And I'll explain and I prove, once again, this is not just for the sake of talking, but we want to prove to you that when you get your information from those sources, it is 100% certain that they are deceiving you. They use bits and pieces of what's in the news, bits and pieces of information, and they pass that to you, wrap it with their lies, with their deception. And there is a reason that they do that. It's because that's a way of life for them. The more that they can keep you in ignorance, the better it is for them, because they have an audience, and it's easier to keep you in ignorance because you buy what they're selling. They're selling you hatred. They're selling you belief, ideals, ideology, which, by the way, they do not share. And I will also prove that, although the whole point of the discussion is really to discuss the welfare system, which is part of the group of benefits that Mitch McConnell proposed to cut in order to take care of the debt. So I came up with this brilliant idea: the welfare for the welfare for the wealthy, the tax cut, that is. It's a welfare for the wealthy. It's easier to sell it under tax cut because we hate the word welfare to the point that we are willing to kick people that need help out of public assistance, because the word welfare really is a bad word. And we shouldn't be talking about that. Besides, who would want to be working so hard and to support people who just are so lazy and don't want to go to work? That's part of the myth that we will discuss. Now, those are the items of the entitlement system. When we talk about the fight to the entitlement system, we're talking about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, and all the other financial assistance that the government gives to the least fortunate among us. The reason that I read the passage in the Bible, Matthew 25, is to prove the point that if you call yourself a Christian and at the same time you can justify cutting off those who are the least fortunate among us, but have no problem whatsoever footing up a bill for those who already have plenty, then you should re-examine what you mean when you say you are a Christian. Because you cannot love the label of Christianity, but at the same time live the life of someone who would not even be welcomed by the devil. That's how bad it is. Now back to showing you how Republicans for decades have managed to hurt the constituent, to hurt the country. 1935, Franklin Roosevelt signed a Social Security Act, passed a Social Security Act. When we talk about Social Security, it is because of that, 1935. Franklin Roosevelt decided that when we get old, when we can no longer go to work, most likely most individuals in the country would not be able to take care of themselves. You don't have enough saving to take care of you, because the people that actually politicians like to call middle class, those people are not middle class. They really at the lower class, the poor class, if you like. They live paycheck to paycheck. By the time you retire, you actually need that Social Security check. So Franklin Roosevelt passed the act. That's why your grandparents, your great-grandparents, probably your parents, you most likely, depends on where you're at in your age bracket, you may be becoming eligible for Social Security, your children, your grandchildren, and so on. So when you look at it on the surface, when Franklin Roosevelt proposed that, it was something that, any sound-minded individual would say, that's a great idea, because yes, people have been working hard, so when they retire, why should they get worse? Newsflash, Republicans overwhelmingly, 1935. By the way, I use 1935, I start there, but way before that, a number of presidents have tried to pass some universal health care system, and Republicans have always opposed that. I start there to make my point. Republicans overwhelmingly were completely against that. Thank God, Democrats were for it, so it passed. For a number of years, Republicans have tried to undermine it, to get rid of it. Eventually, they came around, and today we have Social Security. So the reason that your parents or grandparents, probably, you, when you retire, and so on, are hopeful that at that time in your life, unless you're a wealthy individual, you may not care if the Social Security idea completely disappear. You may not care. But if you are in that middle group, the largest group of individuals who work in the country, when you get old, you expect a Social Security check. And that will definitely help you. You may save some money here and there, but in reality, you will somehow depend a great deal on Social Security. That was due to the 1935 Act passed by Franklin Roosevelt. Republicans overwhelmingly were against that. I'm giving you an example to show you that it's not just today that we're having Republicans always opposing what's beneficial for the constituent. That is already established. It's written. It's in history book. And they still continue. You could have said, well, it was Republican in the past, right? You could have said that. But it is still going on. I'm going to give you example all the way to today. And that's going to serve as the basis for us to continue the discussion about the welfare system. So you get a good grasp as to why when you go to the poll and you cast your vote for a Republican, I guarantee you're casting a vote against your own interest. And I say that it's because for decades. No, it's not just Republican in the past, because you could have said, okay, 1935, those Republicans are dead, they're no longer around. But hold your horses for a moment, because I'm going to show you that they have indeed been doing that forever. And they are not about to change. 30 years later, 1965. Now, in 1961, Lyndon Johnson commissioned for a study about, yeah, Social Security is great. People who retire, who get old, get a paycheck, a Social Security check. It's great. But as we know, as we're getting older, our health usually gets not any better. So older people are more likely not to enjoy good health than younger people. That's a normal course of life. And it's at that time that we will need to have some sort of healthcare coverage, right? There was no such thing in 1965, in 1960, 1965. Now, in 1961, Lyndon Johnson commissioned a study to find that information and to understand what at stake. Now, when that was proposed, is it necessary for me to tell you that Republicans were against the idea, even the study, to find that out? Do I need to say that? Well, yes, I do. Republicans overwhelmingly say, no, we don't need to know that. They can pay for their own healthcare system. Besides, they have a Social Security check. Mind you, that Social Security check that we're talking about can barely scratch the surface. The first person who actually got a Social Security check after the act was passed, I believe the act was passed in 1935, and the first Social Security check went out, if I'm not mistaken, a year later, and the person got $24. No kidding. Actually, it could have been 21. I'm not sure anymore, but just to give you an idea. But Republicans overwhelmingly say, hey, yeah, please don't do this. Let them pay for their own healthcare system, for their own healthcare. Once again, 30 years later, you could have said 1935, well, Republicans just didn't understand those kind of things, right? 30 years later, brand new group of Republicans in Washington crafting legislations. 30 years later, Lyndon Johnson commissioned a study, and from the get-go, Republicans just raised their hand and said, no, 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 no. So, of course, Lyndon Johnson went, let the whole process go through. And when the information was given back to Lyndon Johnson, it was pretty obvious to him that, yes, those older people that were receiving a Social Security check, they are the most vulnerable in health-related matters, and they do not have coverage. So let's add a clause to the Social Security Act. I believe it was Article 18 to the Social Security Act, so that those same people, they're already on the roster of older people, retired people, so that they can be covered under an act passed as Medicare. Overwhelmingly, Republicans say, no, 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 I don't want that. We're just not going to go for it. Now, here's an interesting bit of story that you should know. At that time, Ronald Reagan was not in politics. He was an actor, but he was also very much against that. He went on record campaigning against the idea. He was on fire. It shouldn't be, because that's socialized healthcare, socialized socialism. Ronald Reagan was totally against that. And I believe that could have been one of the reasons Ronald Reagan moved from being a Democrat to becoming a Republican. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating here. But that could have tilted that balance because he was completely against the idea. Lyndon Johnson signed the act. Medicare became an item added to the Social Security. Passed. Republicans wouldn't hear of it. Example number 2. I'm showing you that your Republican legislators, over the decades, they have always been against what's beneficial for the constituent. Always. You can, if you were to be a time thing, you can set your watch on it. They always against it. They have argument, by the way, because they always have argument against to show you why they're against something. They have plenty of argument. It's gonna cost the country. It's gonna ruin the treasury. It's going. Overwhelmingly against it. Well, thank God, Lyndon Johnson did not pay any attention to them. So Medicare became part of items, benefits, older people, people who are retired, they have at least coverage for their health care. Now, if you think back, your grandparents or great-grandparents, your parents, when they retire, when you retire, you have Medicare, which will cover you, unless you're wealthy. Of course, you don't need that. But for the majority of the people, the constituent living in the United States of America, this is necessary for them. The Social Security check, the Medicare coverage, healthcare coverage are absolutely necessary for those people. Republicans said no. That's 1935, they said no to Social Security. 1965, they said no to Medicare. Oh, there is more. The same year, Lyndon Johnson decided, well, there are also, instead of having a healthcare coverage called Medicare that covers older people and everybody else, so there is another provision called Medicaid that is somewhat separate from Medicare, and that was smart that Lyndon Johnson did it that way, added as Article 19. So the Medicare is Article 18, the Medicaid is Article 19 of the Social Security Act. So that too in 1965 was passed and was meant to take care of the, I'll call it not older people, but people who don't have coverage, people who could not afford coverage, anybody that did not fall into the category of retired older people would be covered under the Medicaid. Do I need to tell you that Republicans were completely against that? Yes, it may sound like a broken record, but you need to know, to understand that benefits that are any legislations that are beneficial for the constituent, Republicans are against it. And they pass legislation that are against the constituent, that harm the constituent. We do not have any doubt that's the case, because we have plenty of information to show you that is indeed the case. Don't go anywhere. We have more example. Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the Fourth Branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment. There is more. 1935, Republicans opposed Social Security Act. 1965, Republicans opposed passage of Medicare. 1965, Republicans opposed passage of Medicaid. Now we're going to take a major leap and leave all the small little legislation that Republicans were against and jump to 2010. 2010, a healthcare act proposed by Obama, aka Obamacare. Do I need to tell you all the Republicans were against it? Of course not, because now you're living in the era of that particular legislations. So I don't need to convince you about that. So 1935, 1965, 2010. Now, it's not that there were nothing in between. Again, as I say, major legislation. So I jump to bring it to the current time that we're living. 2010, not a single Republican voted for Obamacare. Not a single one, both in the House and the Senate. Whenever there are legislations that are beneficial for the constituent, you can set your watch that Republicans will be against it. Now, if Democrats weren't steadfast, there would have not been any Social Security. The reason we're talking about Social Security today is because Democrats and the president then, Roosevelt, didn't pay any attention, any mind to the Republicans. 1965, Democrat and Lyndon Johnson didn't pay any mind to the Republican. That's why Medicare is still around. That's why Medicaid is still around. 2010, Republicans once again reared their ugly head and against Obamacare. Now, you need to know that there are 14 governors who opposed Obamacare and did not even provide constituents in those states to sign up for Obamacare. And despite that, do you know that there are 20 plus million people who are currently covered under Obamacare? Not 20 plus million Democrats, 20 plus million people, Democrats and Republicans alike. Your Republican legislators, those people you send to Washington, those very people, we're not talking about someone just telling you some story, speculation. You go on Fox and you hear a bunch of people talking a bunch of lies to you. We're talking about data, information, history. Republicans have always worked against the constituent. Always. In 2010, they all voted against Obamacare. All of them. Now, is it because they believe Obamacare was bad? Of course not. Social Security, they wouldn't vote for it because that's not good for the country. Hey, that's going to bring the country down to its knees. Medicare, 65, they wouldn't touch it because you know what that's going to do to the country. Medicaid now, Obamacare. Republicans have always done what's wrong for the constituent. But it's not just going against what's good for the constituent, because those examples that I just gave you are clearly examples of Republicans who wanted to prevent those things from becoming part of our lives and helping us, when we get older, at least get coverage. So they don't just go one way. On top of going against what's beneficial for us, the constituent, they also been very busy passing legislation that are also against us, continuously against us. Now, I'm not going to discuss the George W. tax cut. You can find detail of that discussion on the website that on the YouTube, People Branch YouTube channel that I will provide again at the end of this program. But let me point out to you that on February 2017, all the Republicans voted to pass a $1.5 trillion tax cut. Was it for the benefit of the people? The answer is no. 1.275. Rounded it off, $1.3 trillion of those $1.5 trillion went to large corporations and wealthy individuals. That wasn't for the people. But that's not where I'm heading with the conversation. The conversation had to do with the fact that they borrowed the money. The money had to be borrowed. The country doesn't have the money. We had to borrow the money. Now, in case you don't know, when you borrow money, you have to pay interest in it. So when we talk about $1.5 trillion, it's no longer $1.5 trillion. By the time that money, you finish paying for that money, take a look at your mortgage and see, by the time you finish paying your mortgage, if you took a $500,000 loan, it probably jumped to $750,000 or more. So the more you borrow, the more you owe. So Republican passed a $1.5 trillion welfare for the wealthy. It's not a tax cut. It's the same principle of what Republicans in general have been fighting against, by saying when you help those in need, the least fortunate, they call it welfare, because handout. Now they borrow $1.5 trillion and give a handout to the wealthy. Welfare for the rich. Of course, they call it tax cut because it doesn't sound good to call it welfare for the rich. You wouldn't go for it because you hate the word so much that if they use those words, then you would have been on the street protesting against that. So they call it tax cut. So Republicans did pass a legislation that are against our own interests. They borrow the money, they give it to the wealthy, to the rich, and they hand us a tax bill. Yes, it is against our interests. So it's not done for our benefits. So not only they're going against legislation that are good for us, but they're also passing legislation that are against our own interests. over and over and over. It is not a one time, a two time, it's for decades now. Now, we already know that. It's already established. The question is, why do we, the constituent, who pay the price of this type of behavior of those legislators, why do we keep voting them in office? That's the big question. Because it's one thing to say, you Republicans, but it is a completely different thing to keep rewarding the individual who doing harm to you. Marcus Cicero, who is a Roman philosopher in 63 BC, said, any man can make mistakes. Any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error. So if you elect someone to represent you in Washington and that individual keep doing the wrong thing and you keep sending that person back under the banner of Republicans, who is the idiot? Now, that's the basis for our conversation when we go into the discussion of the welfare system, because I want you to understand that the Republican representative, those individuals that we elected to represent us, to work to make our lives better, to make our life easier, to improve our lives, those are the very individuals who work as aggressively as possible to make our lives harder. They work to our detriment. Yes, they tell us great things. For instance, when they were passing the welfare for the rich, you had a bunch of those legislators, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, they all out there, they touting this wonderful tax cut for the people. We're going to give a huge tax cut to the people. Masters of deception. Not only they have this Machiavellian way, but they're also masters of deception. They come and tell you that you're going to get a huge tax cut. Golly, they're borrowing $1.5 trillion to give to you. And it so happens, you look at your paycheck and you see an extra $40, an extra $60. Yes, some people think, oh, this is better than nothing. But that's where the deception comes. Because that $40 and that $60 is not yours. It's just a way to appease you so that when you receive the tax bill, and at that time they're hoping that a Democrat will be in power and you can blame the Democrats for it. Masters of deception. Republicans are masters of deception. But the worst part is they also do things that hurt the constituent, that are against the constituent. So when you hear your Republican legislators talking about cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and any welfare assistance program because, we just have a national debt that's out of hand and we need to take care of that. Ask them the question, why did they add another $1.5 trillion to the national debt? Why did they do that? If they were so concerned about the national debt, if it were that much of a big problem for the Republican legislators, why they were so eager to add those $1.5 trillion to the national debt? There was no reason behind it. At the time that Republicans did that, Economy was great. Wall Street was brimming with cash. Companies were reporting record revenues, record profit. Who does that? Not only what they did was wrong in terms of adding to the national debt, but they also hand us a tax bill for it. Yes, we, the people. So yes, we're not just talking for the sake of talking. We're not just telling you those things because, gee, it's a damn liberal talking. By the way, we don't have any political affiliation. The very purpose of this program is to use verifiable, justifiable data and explain it to you in plain language so that you can see it for yourself. And you make your decision. Yes, you can stick to continuously voting someone who is going to continuously punching you in the gut, but at least you have the knowledge. You know the punch is coming. It would not be sucker punch. It would not be a surprise. At least you know it's coming. Because as I just demonstrated to you, it's not today that Republicans have been legislating against the benefit of the constituent. They've been doing that for decades, for a century now. They've been doing that. Just recently, they voted against Obamacare, which is good for the constituent, and they also passed a welfare for the rich, which they hand us the tax bill. Yes, Republican legislators, masters of deception, because they sell that money that they borrow to give to the wealthy, they sell it to us as a tax cut. And by now, most of us are finding out that that's not the case at all. It's not a tax cut for us. It is a tax cut for the wealthy, obviously, but it is a tax bill for the rest of us. If someone or anyone has to lie to you about what they're doing, that should raise a red flag for you. If they have to lie. And they had to lie. Because had they come to us and say, well, we're going to borrow $1.5 trillion, $1.3 trillion out of that, we will be giving to the large corporation and wealthy individuals. And we'll just give you the crumbs, the scrap. But keep in mind, you, the constituents, are responsible for the $1.5 trillion. How do you think we would react? That's why they had to lie. They are masters of deception. Republicans are masters of deception. Republican legislators. Now, the big question that I have for you, Republican constituent, is this. It's simple. Why would you keep rewarding someone who continuously hurt you? Why would you do that? I have a very difficult time grasping that. Why would we continue to vote in office individuals who are determined to hurt us? We will continue the discussion on the welfare system. What we just lay out for you is the basis so that you understand when we're talking about the detail of the welfare system, everything that you've heard before from either from your legislators or from those pundits who either are as ignorant as the people that they're trying to convince, or they simply doing what they've been doing all along, lie to you because that's the way that they can keep getting a paycheck. But we're going to debunk all the mystery about welfare system. We're going to show you what the welfare system has been doing, who is on the welfare, what benefit they're getting, and ultimately what progress that has made for the country. Because contrary to what you've been hearing, the welfare system has been given a bad name by the same legislators that have been working so hard to harm us, we the constituent. Yes, they've been making it such that if you are getting financial assistance, you should feel belittled. You should feel ashamed of yourself, and you should go and kill yourself because you shouldn't be getting that. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere. The Fourth Branch program will return in just a moment.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch Project, the first and only program which is dedicated exclusively to those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. The Fourth Branch Project seeks to emphasize country over party. Its primary objective is to restore interest in civic duty and involvement in social, political issues, discussion, debate, which might impact lives in this generation and quite possibly in future ones. Put differently, the Fourth Branch Project is a journey towards restoring America's greatness, where patriotism is the foundation of every decision, every policy, every word, every action. Said differently, it is a journey to save democracy in America. Stay with us. We will be right back.
I do thank you for spending the time with me, and I encourage you to follow this program. It is the Fourth Branch program. We do not have a political agenda. We do not have a political interest. We discuss social issues, political issues which impact our lives, which impact this country. And those issues are issues of great importance in our lives. And the action, the legislation that are done in Washington, most of the time we get tidbit of information from different networks, and we don't get the grasp of how those items impacts our lives. So that's the purpose of the Fourth Branch program. So we now discussing the welfare system. We talk about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, but now we are currently looking at the welfare. Now, to be fair, those items that I just mentioned also are part of the welfare system, but we decide to discuss them separately. Now, for the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, on the People Branch YouTube channel, you will find the discussion we already have about those topics. And we are now going to talk about the welfare system and provide enough detail to show you that indeed what you know about the welfare system, we're going to debunk every myth about the welfare system, and we're going to show you that why it is not necessary, why people who are on welfare, people who have been receiving government assistance, they should not feel any less than those individuals who are not. And they should consider that as a stepping stone to get their life in order, to get things in order, and be able to get out of the predicament so that they can better their lives. And we're going to also give you example of individuals, famous individuals, who were at some point in their lives on welfare, and they have made something out of their lives. So tomorrow at 2 p.m. on the People Branch YouTube channel, we will continue the discussion. You don't want to miss it, because this is the only place you will get enough detail, enough information to give you an understanding of any topic that you may have thought about or you may think about. And in the meantime, if you should have any topic that you would like to have some sort of research done, some sort of discussion about, do not hesitate to contact us. We will provide you at the bottom of this program information how to contact us. So if you have a topic that you're interested in, or something you heard, you're not sure, or you've been hearing different things from different sources, and you want to know exactly what is not, this is the right place for you to get that information. Yes, it may sound sometimes biased, and it will. And not because we go out of our way to sound biased, but because the discussion at hand will most likely please some people and not so much some others. And the reason for that is because if you're already leaning one way, if the discussion doesn't seem to favor you, then you will say, this guy is biased. Regardless, whatever discussion that we're gonna have here, it will be backed up with, supported by historical data, by justifiable information. Now, what you say beyond that is not of any concern of us. So, you want information, discussion, debate about topic that impact your life, this is the place for you to be. And we hope to see you again tomorrow at 2 p.m. on the People Branch YouTube channel. I do hope you have a good afternoon or a good evening, whichever that happens to be for you. Good day. The Fourth Branch Podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.